The Australian Financial Review.
The partners who were closest to her said she should be the next partner, but she doesn't want it. She has a family and she has told us she doesn't want partnership. And then that person resigned to take a partnership somewhere else. It's okay not to be doing everything yourself. In fact, it's incredibly important for you not to be doing everything yourself.
Hi, I'm Sally Patton, editor of Boss from the Australian Financial Review, and welcome to 15 Minutes with the Boss, a podcast about success and failure and everything in between. And along the way, we're hoping to get some really great advice from our leaders. My guest today is Renae Lattey, the Chief Executive Partner at King & Wood Mallesons in Australia. Hi Renae, how are you?
Hi Sally, great to be here.
Lovely to see you on the screen. Unfortunately, a screen, not in person, but, maybe we can get together another time.
Sounds good.
Now, Renae, you're the Chief Executive Partner at law firm King & Wood Mallesons in Australia, which actually also takes in Singapore. KWM is one of the big 5 law firms in Australia, measured by the number of partners. You have 192 partners and about 1,200 staff. That seems like kind of enough to keep you busy from day to day?
It's plenty to keep me busy, that's right.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to allow us to spend 15 minutes with the boss. Let's start the clock right now. Renae, so my first question is about your morning routine. What time do you get up? What happens?
Oh, Sally, I think last time we got together, I said that I got up at 6 and sat and did Wordle in my bed with my son, and it was all quite regimented. And I think that might have been a couple of years ago. My routine is all over the place at the moment. I think I probably travel a lot more than I was travelling back then. And so the routine can be anywhere from getting up at 4 o'clock to get the 6 o'clock flight, or if I'm home in Melbourne, it will be very much about being up around 6 o'clock, trying not to look at the phone, trying to get myself organised for the day and get the kids out the door. So a little bit all over the place, Sally.
So what in particular do you try and streamline so that you can just get out the door and be at work at the time you've got to be at work?
One of the things for me, and maybe this is a female-specific thing, I try and be quite organised about what I'm going to be wearing the next day.
Yeah.
Because you can waste so much time worrying about what it's going to be. And for me, just having that streamlined is a really important productivity hack.
So do you do that the night before, or do you plan it the whole week?
No, for me, it's either the night before or it's, the first thing I think about when I'm waking up.
Is there anything else you can streamline?
2 things. I will take some oats in a little container, and there's my breakfast on the go. And the second thing is to stop me eating not as well as I should eat during the day. So having cucumber, peppers, carrots chopped up in a little container, it just helps me through those hungry moments in a semi-healthy way. But that's just what works for me.
That's a really good tip about carrots and cucumbers, to keep you energised, but by the same token, making sure you're not eating the bad stuff. Now, Renae, my next question is, what was a pivotal moment in your career that changed the trajectory of what you were doing?
There were 2 moments that changed the way that I lead, and me being much more open and honest with people about these things. And the first was I spent a lot of my younger career, having fears and doubts, and you spend a lot of time thinking that it's just you. So years ago, we had a partner conference, and one of the things we had to do was put in a box the things that people were going to throw away, stop doing. And years later, I spoke to one of the people in management at the time, and they said that box was full of effectively impostor syndrome, people going to throw away their fears and doubts. And it was at that moment that I realised, gosh, it's not just me that's had those in my career. And the second time was when we spend a lot of time on succession and leadership at the firm and the pipeline of talent. And we had been discussing a particular individual, female, and the partners who were closest to her said she is the best. She should be the next partner, but she doesn't want it. She has a family and she has told us she doesn't want partnership. And then that person resigned to take a partnership somewhere else.
Oh.
It's not that she doesn't want partnership. She doesn't want it with us. Now, the good news is that we managed to get her to stay with us, and she is now a partner. But it told me that, especially when you're dealing with talented people coming through who are female, and I'm sure it happens to the males as well, but we see it a lot with the females. If you hear people say, I don't want partnership, it's not the time to put them to the side and go, phew, I don't need to worry about promising them a career that I'm not going to be able to give them. It's a time to go deeper and try and understand why, because often why they're saying that is because they either can't see it done in a way that they want it to be done for themselves, or they don't think that they're capable, whereas everyone else around them does think that they're capable. And unfortunately, we see that quite a bit with females. So that has changed the way that I lead. So I now talk to the younger folks when they come into the organisation and say, look, many of you will be sitting here thinking you might not belong. And so it's a way of just putting that on the table early on to tell everyone you are good enough. You absolutely can make it in this place. So don't let your own thoughts, fears and doubts hold you back.
So why do you think it's the females that feel like they're not capable?
I don't like grossly generalising in this way, because there will be plenty of male examples who would think the same way. But I do think females typically will see what's ahead of them, talk themselves into the fact that they're not exactly that, and therefore they should think about a different path. Whereas my experience is that with males, it's perhaps, they'll keep going until they're told you won't make it.
Yeah.
Whereas the females tend to make a decision themselves. And so, look, it's just those examples were really good for me, both at completely different times of my career, but really good for me to think about that when I'm talking to people now. Think about actually, well, what do people need to hear early so that they don't make career decisions they might later regret or not know was possible?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now, Renae, my next question is, what is the best piece of career advice you've ever been given?
Well, I'll tell you what the worst piece of advice
Oh,
I've
do
ever
tell.
been given. I'll tell you that one first. When I went overseas to work in one of the big law firms, and somebody there who was also an Antipodean said to me, whatever you do, don't ask questions.
No.
Because it'll show what you don't know. And so, for my first couple of months working there, I would just be working all hours of the day and night to try and figure it out for myself. So I think the best piece of advice is about the importance of listening. It wasn't just a single moment where somebody said to me, this is something that, you should put on your list of must-dos. I watched and observed the great client relationship leaders in our firm and noticed that the best ones, the ones who formed the strongest relationships, were people who could listen really well.
Interesting. So when you're in a meeting of any kind, do you try and make a conscious effort to listen more than you speak?
It will depend on the meeting, but too often I think I see people that have got an outcome in mind go into the meeting, and I've actually seen it happen a lot, and will come out with a completely different impression of the meeting than me. I mean, it's always good to go in with an intention, whatever the situation is, but unless you are listening, you're not going to be building the trust, the rapport, the relationship, and at the end of the day, you're not going to get what you need out of that encounter.
So do you think you listen more and ask lots of questions partly because you realise the folly of one of those original pieces of advice you were given when you went offshore? In other words, don't ask questions.
I've reflected on that a number of times, Sally. I think you're spot on.
Don't go away. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to open our delightful chatterbox. Welcome back to 15 Minutes with the Boss. I'm here with Renae Lattey, the Chief Executive Partner at law firm King & Wood Mallesons. Now, Renae, this is our section called the Chatterbox. Now, in front of me, rather new because we're in different cities, is our Chatterbox. It's a really beautiful, high-tech brown box, inside which are 15 to 20 questions all folded up on pieces of paper. On your behalf, I'm going to choose them one by one and ask you to answer them.
Yes.
I'll start foraging. What part of your job don't you like?
There's a lot about my job that's really hard, but they're not the bits that I don't like. They're the bits that you learn from and that when you do them, you feel like $1 million because you've actually solved something or helped move something along. But the thing that I don't like or I find the most challenging is just the sheer balance between wanting to do a great job and having personal demands. And I'm not somebody who sits here and says, well, you can have everything and be amazing at everything. I think that's really hard. And I get help to make sure that, I'm doing the best that I can on the home front and in the office. But there is a lot of travel in my job. And to do it well, I need to do that travel. And I just try when I can to prioritise the family side. So that's probably the bit that's the hardest, Sally.
So what do you do to achieve that work-life balance? And what's your advice to others who have got busy schedules like you?
Biggest suggestion that I have for people is it's okay not to be doing everything yourself. In fact, it's incredibly important for you not to be doing everything yourself. So my key piece of advice is you get help on the home front, because I don't think it's right for anyone to spend the time that you are at home doing, a full-time job of doing all the other things. And, especially for somebody like me, I don't have family here in Australia, so I can't rely on the unpaid support that you get from those around you. And so actually putting in place arrangements means that I'm not trying to negotiate on a daily basis. How do I get stuff done?
So what sort of help do you mean? Is it in the form of a cleaner that comes in every day? Does someone cook your meals? Or what sort of help actually has been the most use to you?
I find this question quite challenging because as a partner sitting in our business, it's very easy for me to say, well, I have a nanny. And sometimes when I say that in front of my organisation, people would say, well, that's all very well for you. You can afford that. And that's a legitimate criticism. But I would just encourage anyone to really evaluate how much is me trying to do all of the chores on my off time affecting the time that I'm giving to myself. And I think making sure that you spend time for yourself is incredibly important.
So getting outside help is giving you time for your work and your family, but it's also giving you time to regenerate.
Spot on.
It's great.
Yeah.
Let's go for another question. Are you ready for this? Do you have hobbies?
Probably the key one is getting back to playing the piano. I used to play it a lot when I was at school and did all of my fancy exams. In fact, it was always going to be my fallback career, teaching piano, just in case everything else didn't work out. And when I had my second child, I thought this was a great opportunity to spend a bit more time getting back to the level that I used to be. And I was quite naive, of course, but I still play it quite a bit during the week. More stressful weeks, I play it a bit more. And I don't think I realised how it's not just a hobby, it's actually quite a good way to unwind for me.
And what kind of music do you play?
All classical.
Do you have a favourite piece of music?
Oh, I've got loads of favourite pieces of music, but if I was to think about a favourite composer, it's probably Debussy.
Oh, I love Debussy as well. Clair de Lune is one of my favourite pieces from him. Okay, next question. What are your favourite interview questions when hiring somebody and why?
Probably the two that I'll always ask is what's going to help make this a success for you and what's going to mean that this might derail. Because I think, especially the first one, everyone's different. Sometimes when you ask that question, it's a really simple thing like, well, if you just let me stay at home in my PJs once a week so that I can get my work done, that's going to work really well for me. And sometimes it's something much grander. But where I've seen failures in the past has been where people have come on for a particular role clearly the right questions haven't been asked by both sides on the way in, and then there's a misalignment of expectations. So I always try and get those expectations out in the interviews. So what's going to make it a success? And if they mention something that's just not part of the role or I know we'll never be able to deliver on, I always make that really clear. And then the other one about the derailer, like what might mean that this is not a success. Again, it's just having that clarity and transparency around expectation.
So do you find those two questions are particularly revealing in a sense that people will open up about themselves and you'll learn quite a lot about somebody?
Yes, and not everyone goes to the personal in those questions. Some will go to the very tactical side of things. But yeah, quite often people will open up about themselves and the things that they then need. So for example, I've had somebody say, look, if somebody's going to be micromanaging me, that's not going to work. I don't work as well in those circumstances. So I find, and maybe it's the sorts of people that these days that I'm interviewing, because you really do need to know the way that somebody will work.
Okay, Renae, on that note, we have completed the Chatterbox section. I now have one final question that we ask all our guests, and that is, in the extremely unlikely event, or maybe not, maybe potentially likely event that you are given a year off, you can do anything you like, you're unencumbered, what would you do?
If it were just me, I think there's two things I'd love to do. One is get back up to performance standard piano.
Wow.
And the second thing is I'd love to go back and be a student again.
University?
Yes, and learn something new. If I think back in my career and to the times that I was my happiest, it's when you are really being stretched and learning a completely new thing, how an industry works, how an issue, a legal issue gets unpacked. So being able to do that again, maybe not with the exams, I don't know, but just that curiosity to learn something new.
And that is our 15 minutes up. Renae, thank you so much. It's been so great talking to you today. I love the advice you have about getting outside help, which frees up time for your family, your work, and more importantly, for you. I love the way you talk about the importance of listening, and really interesting the two questions that you ask in interviews. In other words, what is going to help you to succeed in a role and what is going to derail you in the role, so that everyone gets their expectations right from the get-go. And Renae, I am so looking forward to hearing you play the piano sometime. So thank you for allowing us to spend 15 minutes with the boss.
Thank you, Sally. It's been lovely to be here.
And thank you to everyone for listening. If you like the podcast and would like to hear more, please consider sharing the podcast or writing a review, as it helps us to reach more people. And follow us wherever you get your podcasts. At the Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. For more, go to afr.com, and you can subscribe to the Financial Review, the daily habit of successful people, at afr.com/subscribe. This podcast was hosted by me, Sally Patton, and produced and edited by Lap Fan. Video and audio assistance, and our music theme is by Alex Gao, and our executive producer is Fiona Buffini.
The Australian Financial Review.